You got it. All right. So, what's going on? How are you doing?
Hi. I'm Leah. I am a program manager on the Messenger team. So today I've got a whole bunch of people in the room. So Messenger is the little product that kind of fits on the side of your screen, but it actually requires all kinds of people to get it going. So we gathered a bunch of people in the room today to talk to you about the different parts of Messenger.
And these are the people who actually built it.
Yes, we
right?
have developers and program managers all in the room.
Fantastic.
Get their hands dirty in the code of Messenger.
So what do you do? Are you a program manager?
I'm a program manager. I actually work on, it's kind of a funny role, it's a customer satisfaction role. I spend a lot of time around the news groups and the blogs trying to figure out what are the kind of hot ticket items. And I gather that all up and bring it back into my team to try and help us address the hottest, latest issues.
Excellent. All right. Well, and who's this person over here?
Hi, I'm Adam Seisler, and I'm a dev lead on Messenger. And a lot of people think I'm a PM, but I'm not. Program manager. So my team is responsible for, the platform in Messenger and the UX.
UX being for the people out there.
Oh,
user
so the UX
experience?
is the user experience. Yeah.
Okay.
So what we're talking about is essentially when you see the conversation window, when you actually see the buttons and the sort of look of it, that's all part of my team.
Excellent.
We actually have a bunch of we kind of split into some what we call program areas, and they are responsible for different parts of the product. So, for example, voice and video. So when we make a telephone call, make an audio call, that's a different team. And also we have sharing. We'll get into that later.
Cool.
All right.
All right.
Thanks.
Excellent. I'm going to wander over here so I can actually hear you. These are little mics. So.
Hi, I'm Katie Blanche. I'm a developer on the Messenger team as well. I kind of work under Adam a couple levels.
Okay.
And the latest feature that I worked on that's pretty cool that I'm hoping to talk to you guys about is this new plugin model that we have. So.
Very cool. Where people can write their own plugins.
That's correct.
Very
Finally.
cool. Excellent.
Hi, I'm John Holmes. I'm the development lead that owns the platform on the IM client in Messenger, and I guess we do some platform stuff for other parts nowadays, but that wasn't really planned. And so I also was the developer who originally wrote all the peer-to-peer features in Messenger and a bunch of client-server stuff and sort of a lot of networking things. So.
Excellent. Nice job.
I'm Dan McCulloch. I'm a program manager on the Windows Live Messenger team. I own Yahoo Interop. I own other things, but that's the big one right now.
Well, that's a huge one. We should dig into that for sure. All right.
Hi, I'm Aarti. I'm a developer on the team, and I've primarily worked on Yahoo Interop. I'm supposed to be a UX dev, but I just do a lot of platform work these days.
Okay.
And
excellent.
That's the way to go.
Nice job.
Hi, I'm David. I'm actually on a different team altogether. I'm on the Messenger server team.
Aha.
But I did a lot of the work behind the sharing folders feature in Messenger.
Okay. Excellent. So, you guys are releasing something new, right? Or you did. There was a beta.
Yeah, well,
Released, what was it, yesterday?
Actually, so we've been in beta for almost a year now, and just yesterday we released the final version of the client, so we're all pretty excited around here.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So what's it like to write software that, at least, 150 million people use every day?
At least.
240
million.
240 million.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's incredible, right?
I mean, it's awesome. It's also it's a big success and a big challenge because you have so many different types of people all over the world using the same piece of software. So it's something that we're dealing with all the time: how to make things work in 30 different languages and.
Yeah, when I first started, I was, they're like, make Messenger stuff go through NATs and on people's home networks, so stuff works all the time. And I was like, I'm going to open up all these security holes, and I was like worried. But now I'm just like, I've been here like 4 years. I'm like, whatever. I send stuff out, and it's great, and people like it. And I'm not nearly as worried. I'm more relaxed.
But of course, you still take security seriously and
much more so.
Steps.
Now there's like a whole process around it,
Yeah.
and like there's like institutionalized worry about security.
Yeah.
So like we have like outside people come in and like try to do like penetration hacking against our protocols, and we we have our own like threat modeling and security reviews and work with cryptographers, and it's like this, it's much less worrying for me, I guess, because now we focus so much more on it as a company, maybe. I don't know.
Sure.
I think one thing that's kind of interesting about having a product that touches so many people, 240 million people, first of all, it's like a number that's impossible, for me at least, to even conceptualize. I can say it, but you don't really get it. But one thing is you do have to sort of please everyone. I mean, people can say, hey, my mom won't be able to use this, but it's like, my mom is not the only person. It's got to work for my mom and my friend who's a really power user, and that's, I think, some of the hardest challenges we have. Besides, there's technical challenges, and then there's also the challenge of what do we actually build, and whatever we do. And later we're going to get to some of the questions on the forum, but
From the Niners.
From the Niners, yeah.
See, I told you guys that we'd ask them. Right.
Yeah, so we'll get to those, and a lot of them, I don't know if our answers will necessarily be satisfactory, but some of the reasons why we do things have to do with that sort of broad, huge base of people that we have.
Sure. So now, since our audience is mainly developers and, some children, whose names I won't mention, sorry, how does this work? Like, how does Instant Messenger work? Is it really peer-to-peer?
Okay, so...
I mean, is it really peer-to-peer?
I guess I'll draw on the whiteboard.
Good.
Yeah.
Very good.
So Messenger is like a hybrid client-server peer-to-peer app. So it started off client-server, so let me draw a couple clients. So there's Alice and Bob here. And then each of Alice and Bob log into a server that's in our data center called a connection server, which is why I wrote CS. These are persistent TCP connections. They could also be proxied through an HTTP gateway if necessary because of firewall issues and things like that. Behind these connection servers is a back end consisting of a bunch of presence servers. So, there's lots of these. Each person will get hashed basically to some presence server that is their presence server for that particular person. The presence server is where things like your friendly name, your status, away, online, all that stuff, your the description of what your user picture is, your personal status message that you type into Messenger, all that stuff is stored in your presence server. Your buddies, when they tell the connection server who their buddies are, their connection servers subscribe to their buddies' presence servers to get the presence information that is sent up through the client-server connection. So that's how the presence system in Messenger sort of works. So Alice changes her status to offline. It goes up to the CS, up to the presence server, down through the subscription to the CS, and then down to Bob's client. And then Bob can show the new status. Instant messages go through a sort of another pathway in Messenger. There's these other servers called mixers that send the IM traffic. So when Alice wants to talk to somebody, Alice tells her CS, basically, I would like to talk to somebody. The CS says, okay, go talk to this mixer, and sends her over to a mixer. Then on the mixer, Alice can say, I want to talk to Bob. And then the mixer will route a message through lots of packets, basically, but eventually it'll go through the CS and come down to Bob, and Bob will say, oh, Alice wants to talk to me, hook up to the mixer, and then, I guess I'll use red for this, because they can talk back and forth through the mixer and send IMs.
Excellent.
Now, that's all client-server so far. Where it gets to be peer-to-peer is when they want to send larger pieces of data, like a file or the user tile pictures or audio-video or sort of anything like that. And basically how that works is we set up one of these mixer sessions between the two people who want to talk, and then through the sessions we send a couple packets back and forth that sort of negotiate like how to set up a direct connection, how to set up a secure connection. So I might tell you, my IP address is this, and I support these types of protocols, and I have this sort of NAT or firewall, and you'll tell me what you've got, and then we can say, okay, here's how we can set up a direct connection, and in most cases, set up a direct connection from A to B and send data back and forth that way. But if that fails, and if we can't do that, we can always send data through the mixer. And so the data sort of always can make it from one side to another, which is pretty good. For voice and video stuff, or I guess for voice stuff, not really. Well, for voice and video, there are different relay servers other than the mixers. that do sort of the same function, but it's not really technically important that they're different servers.
So John, you want to talk about? So you mentioned there was a peer connection that was made, if possible, but maybe you can kind of dive a little deeper into the details about how you use TCP and we fall back to UDP, et cetera, and the kind of some of the strategies we use there.
Yeah. So we have this whole abstraction in our client called a transport, and a sort of master session. Underneath the transport, basically any sort of feature in our code that a developer, like any developer on the team wants to work on, like file transfer or file sharing or user tile transfer, any of these features that a person wants to work on, they can use this abstraction of a transport and say, I'd like to get a transport to my buddy Bob. And then, so they make a call on the transport saying, or on the master session really saying, I'd like a session to Bob, so give me Bob. And then the mechanics here basically set up one of those mixer sessions to Bob and provide an abstraction that lets them do things like send data, they get like an on-receive event inside of our code base. And then underneath the transport, the way that's all abstracting is you have all these queues, but you have a bunch of bridges to actually send the data. So there's three sort of ways we can send data right now, and we're adding a fourth, that the data will actually get to the person. So we either can set up a direct TCP connection, which is our first choice, because that's fast, reliable, great, works well. A lot of times we can't. We try to set up a direct UDP connection. The problems with the UDP, as probably some of you know, are that it's not a connection-based protocol, so that packets can get lost, packets can be delivered out of order, they cannot be delivered at all. So we have built on top of UDP our own sort of reliability, guarantees. And then if UDP fails, we'll send stuff through the mixer using the same protocols we would send IMs.
What are on the UDP bit? What are some of the differences between the reliability that you've built on top of UDP and TCP itself?
Oh, so for simplification of testing and development, what we built on top of UDP was an ARQ1 protocol. It's like ARQ1, which just means automatic retransmit requests and have one packet in flight at any time. So basically, if there's two guys and this guy wants to send packets to that guy, he can only have one packet out at once, and the packet sort of heads across to this guy, and then he can send, this guy sends an acknowledgement back that comes here, and then this guy will send his next packet when he gets the acknowledgement. If he doesn't ever get an acknowledgement, he just retransmits that packet and keeps doing that until he gets an acknowledgement eventually. Whereas TCP has all this sliding window stuff and sends a bunch of packets at once and really optimizes the throughput in a much more serious way than we do, which is why we prefer TCP.
Right. So the disadvantage of this is it's potentially much slower.
It is. On a high latency link, it's potentially much slower because you have to wait for a full round trip before sending your next packet.
Is it duplex that you have two packets, so ARQ1 in each direction?
Yes, it is ARQ1 in each direction. And we don't... I don't even remember if we piggybacked the axe or not. I wrote that years ago, so...
Cool. So fundamentally, this architecture hasn't changed in our latest and greatest version of...
fundamentally, it has not changed too much. This stuff has changed here in our 8.0 version. So it used to be before 8.0 that when you first logged in, so when Alice first connected up to her connection server, the connection server would talk to this back-end server called the address book.
Okay.
To find out who all of Alice's buddies are, and then send them down to Alice through this channel. The difference is that now Alice will talk directly to the address book, find out who her buddies are, and then send them up to the connection server. That's the main difference in the client-server interaction in this version.
SSL stuff?
Oh, SSL stuff is a new version, is a new feature of the peer-to-peer stuff. That's a good point. So before 8.0, this channel was unencrypted. This channel, and also the red channel here. Basically anything that went through this transport system was unencrypted before.
Okay.
And now we've added SSL-based encryption to it. We've got Passport, so Passport will issue certificates to to users that ask for them. These are like short-lived but actual certificates that say Bob is really who Bob claims to be, and based on Alice having a certificate and Bob having a certificate, the two of them can set up a SSL or TLS connection to each other and then encrypt data. The only data we're encrypting right now is in the file sharing feature, but there's nothing in principle that would stop us from encrypting all the data that goes across the transport. And it's really end-to-end encrypted. I mean,
Sure.
you can't decrypt it on our mixer, even though the data's going through
But
the
if you
mixer.
if you encrypted and decrypted messages, simple text over, I mean, that would affect performance. No, SSL.
Well, no, but not really, because it's
Okay.
end-to-end, so it's A and B that are doing the encryption, and
I see.
the mixer wouldn't be decrypting them in the middle. They would just be these encrypted packets sort of flying through.
Got it.
And
Clients,
even the real issue, I think, with S-channel and SSL is the connection establishment. That's a really expensive operation. And so since you're not typically setting up a lot of connections to other people all the time, the actual overhead isn't that much on a reasonable, PC. So PCs are getting really, really fast. Intel keeps asking, what are people going to do with all these cycles? So there's one thing you can do. You can encrypt all your traffic.
Cool. So, is there WCF in your future? And
What's WCF?
it used to be called Indigo.
Oh, well, apparently not.
Someday.
It's
And
something
card
that
space.
It's something that back when it was like web services and web services enhancements, we sort of thought about that stuff. And really, we've got a large legacy built up in this protocol. I mean, we're working now on the 16th version of the MSNP, the Microsoft Notification Protocol. And we, these servers support many versions back, and the clients support several versions depending on the version of the client. And it's something we're definitely thinking about, but no real plans.
Do you want to talk about offline IAMs and how the web service works there?
Geez, I don't really know it as well as some people might, but
I mean, generally speaking.
generally speaking, to send an offline message, we have another offline IAM web service. So if Alice is offline when Bob wants to send Alice an IM,
Yes.
Bob sends the message to this offline IAM web service that goes and stores the message in Hotmail. Then when Alice logs in, Alice's server gets a message from Hotmail that says that
There's a message waiting for
there's a
you.
message waiting for you, and then Alice goes and retrieves it from the web service.
Yeah.
And so you could have a purely offline conversation, because then Bob is offline when she retrieves it, sends him one, goes back up there, he gets online,
Yeah.
she's offline, and you just have
Yeah.
an offline party.
Some
Yeah.
people like to call that email.
Exactly. It's moderately instant
They're saved
messaging.
as emails. I mean, they're in Hotmail. They're emails.
Well, the cool thing, the thing is, though, as far as when you go back to like UX, in the old days, which I guess is the last version, when I tried to contact somebody who was offline, I got this little message that says, "You want to send them an email?"
Yeah.
Then it launched my email client.
Yeah, it's great.
Much better.
Yeah.
Much better.
And the key is when the person, when the buddy responds to you, the other contact, it comes via messenger. I mean, we will try to, it all stays within the same experience, so you're not in some of the other email program. Another thing I wanted to note on that, though, is that we actually do we have the feature of appearing offline, and there's a somewhat complex interaction that can happen when essentially, if I'm appearing offline, and if we're both appearing offline, let's say, and I send you an offline message, it'll actually go through that offline IM web service. You'll receive it, but you can, if you're actually online, you can actually set up an SB session with me, and we can actually communicate over the SB.
Mixer.
Oh, I'm sorry, the mixer. So we've changed the name. So that. The intention is so that we can actually have less latency, because if we go through the offline IM web service, it can take quite a while to get the messages. So anyway, it's not necessarily the optimum design. It would be kind of cool if we could just talk to the CS and have the messages just routed offline or online, depending. But that's the way it works today.
Very cool. So what else do we have going on here?
Well, so John was mentioning that, that the sharing feature is one of the things we do a little bit differently. We're actually doing a lot with sharing right now. It's one of our exciting areas. David's actually the right person to talk a little bit more about that, so maybe we can delve into sharing.
Sure.
Yeah, maybe we should talk about the S channel and how you use the transport, etc.
We can talk about that a little bit if you want. Yeah. The S channel, in some sense, was a necessity of going with sharing, because obviously you don't want to share your files with other people when anyone on the internet could read them. That would be a bad thing. So, so one of the sort of requirements to make sharing happen was to get that S channel stuff in. But I think, do you want to go into more detail on that, or is
I
it?
don't know.
Well, let's talk about what is sharing. What are we talking about here?
So the
Sharing
basic
files?
idea of sharing, to go technical, is basically peer-to-peer replication with a multi-master sort of scheme. So basically, every copy on every computer is sort of equally valid, if you will. So the nice thing about doing sharing in this way, as opposed to other ways of doing sharing, is that it's completely asynchronous. So I can share with you regardless of whether you're online or offline, and when you eventually become online, the things that I've shared or changed propagate to your computer automatically. And similarly, when you're interacting with the stuff that I've shared to you, you're interacting with it on the local computer, and it's just as fast as if it were your own files. So literally, we're just taking a folder on your computer and a folder on my computer and guaranteeing that those folders maintain the same basic...
You're synced.
They're synced, yeah.
Okay.
So so that's what we're doing. What I think is really cool about this is sort of within, I don't know, we betaed in December, we're basically the largest peer-to-peer system, I think, that supports mutations. There were other peer-to-peer systems that really didn't support overwrites, which make, if you don't have things change, it's a lot easier to maintain copies that are equal because they didn't change. But we're the first ones to really do it, really broad, really wide scale, in a way that things can change, and we maintain consistency across the different copies. So what we're doing instead is we actually have the contents, and so we, if I have a file named foo and you have a file named foo that are different content, we'll detect that and deal with it appropriately.
So you keep a master copy?
We don't actually. So that's the point of multi-master, is that every copy is a master copy.
Okay.
So
how do you
interesting thing
determine
about
whether
it.
or not the files are equivalent? Where do you do that?
So each master, each copy does its own determination of this. We use a technology actually that we've been taken from Windows. It's shipped with Windows in Server 2000. So I guess it wasn't called that. Windows 2000 had some technology called the file replication system that's used underneath Active Directory in Windows, and we took the file replication technology there and repackaged it and shipped it with Messenger, and so we're using the same basic technology. It's actually a re-implementation from the Windows 2000 version, but
Very
same
cool.
basic idea. So I can go into details of how that stuff works, but basically the idea is that we track changes to files in the file system, and for every change, we record the files that have changed, and then when the two peers talk to each other, we can very efficiently tell each other, each one tells the other what has changed and what hasn't changed, tells each other what has changed, and they can just download those changes and make the changes happen locally, and then you end up with a consistent version.
Very cool.
The negative of doing it this way with a multi-master is that you and I can change the same file in different ways, and at the end of the day, we have to have one copy of that file. So one of our changes ends up sort of losing, as it were, and being moved to what we call the conflict store.
Understood. The conflict store.
So what's interesting about that is we don't know whether people care about these conflicts or not. And so one of the things we want to learn as people use the sharing folder feature is how many people actually go and look at the conflict store and do something with it.
Sure. Well, I mean, if we were sharing a document and we were both changing it and only one got saved, so the next day that I look at it, my changes aren't there, or that person's changes aren't there, that's a bummer.
It is, but to be honest, what ends up happening, like if you and I are working on a document, I'll say, hey, I'm working on this section of the document, don't work on it until I tell you. And then I go ahead and work on it. People have built lots of complicated locking schemes to try to deal with this problem, but in general, that tends to fall back to a social mechanism where people just sort of agree to work on different portions of the project.
Or in Vista, you can take advantage of the transactional file system.
You could do that, but that requires application support as well. And in fact, it wouldn't help here because what you really want is distributed transactions. The problem with distributed transactions is that all peers have to be online and communicating at the same time. So if any of them are offline, you can't do the transaction at all. So what we're allowing you to do is let the transaction continue even though some of the nodes aren't online.
Very cool. Very cool.
Do you want to talk about another thing that I find different about the way that we've done the sharing folders is that we actually, when you say we listen to changes on the file system, we literally listen to the journal record of the whole file system. So the way that we expose it today in the user, in the UX, is we actually have, you click on a buddy and you open up the sharing folder and it's one particular place on your hard drive, but from the technically we could do much more if we wanted to. We've just chosen to limit it in this way because we thought it was simpler to show to the user.
Very good.
So let me draw a little architectural just to show you how it fits into Messenger. So if you think you have the Messenger binary that's there today that has, as John described before, this sort of peer-to-peer transport and a bunch of other stuff, of course. What we've added is we've added a DLL that basically takes this code from Windows and wraps it in a way that Messenger can call into it, for one, but also takes all the things. So when you have code that's in Windows, obviously it can interact with the rest of Windows, but when you take that code out, it can't interact with the rest of Windows necessarily anymore. For one, and for two, this was written as a system service, and so it's meant to be run by very intelligent IT administrators, not by just about everybody, and has lots of config options, and you set up the topology of who can communicate with what, all that kind of stuff. It's very, very complicated. So we sort of eliminated all that and generate all that stuff dynamically instead. And the third thing we did is that since it's a service, it also has sort of privileged operations that it can execute, which Messenger cannot, because Messenger does not run as a privileged application. And so we had to sort of factor a lot of that stuff out. So one of the things Adam was mentioning was this reading the NTFS change journal, which we'll talk about in a minute. But that's one of those privileged operations. So we had to break out some of that functionality and add it as a separate service, which does run with privilege and exposes the information that you can use. So let me explain that a little bit.
Sure.
So you have Messenger. It's running on top of NTFS. Well, it's running on top of Windows, and you have an NTFS folder somewhere. NTFS has a feature called the USN Change Journal that tracks changes to the NTFS files. So any change you make, rename, delete, add new, overwrites, moves, any file system operation is represented as a record in that change journal. And so if you can read the change journal, you can figure out everything that's happened to your file system.
Okay.
There's a little problem with this, is that this change journal tracks changes to the entire file system, but you may only have access to a certain set of the files. So what we had to do is when we read this NTFS journal, we have to strip out the pieces of information which you shouldn't have access to. And we do that, the main one, in fact the only one that's in the journal is the name of the file, because some people use the file names to mean something. So for instance, if I was on some important I don't know, let's say the president's computer, and I could see their change journal, and there was a file called bomb somebody, then I could tell that they're going to bomb somebody. So the name itself is something that you can't give out. So what we do is we wrote a service that Messenger installs, and this thing runs, and you can connect to that service and ask for changes that are in the USN change journal. But the service obfuscates the name, so it basically does a one-way hash and then hands it back. So you can't do much with this one-way hash, except if the file name is the same. So if the file name hasn't changed, that hash will still be the same hash that you had last time. So it sort of gives you a handle on what's changed. The other thing that's contained in the record that we do use is the file identifier. So NTFS has this low-level file identifier. And with the file identifier, you can get access to the file if you have access to it, and then from the file handle, figure out what the file name really is. So you can do the reverse mapping if you have access to the file. So part of what we had to do is we had to get the Windows team to release this API of Open by File ID, which didn't exist before. Sorry, it existed, but it wasn't available before. So we've now got that released, so the public can use it, and then we use it to do that mapping.
Excellent.
So DFSR sort of sits inside of Messenger, as it were, using the Messenger transport. And what it does is it monitors folders that you're sharing out, looks at the USN journal to figure out what's changed, and when things have changed, it keeps this database of information with one entry for every file in a folder that you care about. So if you create a new folder, it'll create a new entry for it, and it keeps this information replication metadata. Phone's ringing. Keeps this replication metadata on all the files. So the basic things that it has a version, it has a globally unique identifier, so that all the different peers agree to the same ID for each file. So if I change a file that you've already seen, you'll see that it's a changed file, not a new file. for instance. So all that information is kept inside DFSR. The other thing it keeps is sort of a summary of all those changes, which we call a version vector.
Okay.
And that we'll come back to that when we talk about how the sync actually happens. The other piece that we've added is basically a cache of the state of other peers. So we call this the VV cache. So when this version of Messenger, say this is Alice's version of Messenger, talks to Bob and they synchronize a folder, Alice will remember the state at Bob's machine, so that when Bob comes online sometime in the future, we can see whether we think anything has changed and know whether we're going to sync with Bob or not. Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's a little bit more technical than that, or I guess we really aren't keeping track of the fact that it's Bob's machine. So that it's Bob, we're keeping track of the fact that it's a particular instance of Bob's machine. So if Bob at work or Bob at home are going to be two different machines, and we have to have different sync states for them.
Okay.
So what can happen, for instance, if I share out information to Bob, he's at work, we synchronize, everything's good to go. He goes home, he may not have the latest copies of the files. So I also need to sync with him at home. And one interesting thing about that is he's got work, so he can make changes at work, sync with me, go home, and then sync with me, and he'll pick up the changes from work even though his two machines didn't talk to each other directly.
Yeah, that's actually kind of a cool point. If you wanted to have a sort of a kind of a way to roam your files, if you had the, if your friend was okay with it, you could use your friend as a relay using the sharing folders. So if I had a file that, whatever, a document, I could share it with John, go move from work to home, and then get it from my share with John, and then it would be a way for me to roam that document. That's just today. That's kind of a little workaround, just for the geeks out there.
Sure. Well, there's lots of them out there.
Yeah.
So, real quick on the algorithm we use, and so my messenger's running. When my messenger sees that somebody else comes online that I've synchronized with before,
Okay.
if I'll look in this cache, I'll say, has my state changed? So since the last time I synced with them, do I know about any changes to my file system or not? If there are changes, I'll send them an invite saying you should come sync with me. Okay. At some point in time, they'll just say, okay, I'll go sync with them because I want to pick up those changes. I have nothing else to do right now, and they'll establish one of these peer-to-peer connections that John was talking about before.
Okay.
So now they've got a peer-to-peer connection. They then exchange version vectors. So basically, I send this compact representation of all the changes that I know about to the other side that compares it, and by the comparison, you can figure out exactly what updates you have not seen on your side. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Then you basically, for each update, you just exchange the update back and forth. The update contains sort of what has changed about the file at a metadata level, so has the name changed, have the attributes changed, that kind of thing. If the file itself has changed, we have an algorithm for very compactly and efficiently exchanging just the bits that have changed. There's a technology called remote differential compression that's built into this DFSR thing as well. So if you have like a 10 megabyte file, say a Word document, and you went in and you added a paragraph, we'll basically just exchange just that paragraph, not the whole thing. That part's pretty easy, but what's really neat is if you go and delete stuff, it'll also figure out when things are deleted and just exchange the deletion. Sort of simplistic algorithms where if you like insert something would cause the whole diff to look like the whole file to look like it's different because everything's at a different offset. So that's sort of an interesting technology as well.
Definitely. Very cool. Well, thank you. That was nice indeed.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah,
So what's
I,
next? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I wanted to, so I definitely want to make sure we get time. I'm just sitting here while some of these guys are talking, reading through some of the questions on the Channel
From the
9.
Niners?
Yeah,
All right.
and I want to get to them. We have a few more developers in there that have
Yes,
some
we
pretty
do.
cool stuff to talk about. For example, I mean, we get feature requests all the time. There's so many things people want. There's, the ability to have different personal messages set for different people on your buddy list, or to have a different sound play when you have a different person sign online, that kind of stuff. There's so many features. We're not getting to them all as fast as I know everyone in this room would like to.
Sure.
So one of the ways that we're working with that is through this cool add-in feature, and it basically, allows developers out in the wild to build these things on top of Messenger. And I mean, that's cool for developers, but it's way cool for everybody else because anyone can use these features. So if one developer goes out there and builds, one of these features that lets say you have a different display picture for everyone on your buddy list or something, anybody can use that add-in so that they can essentially have that feature. So it's a really awesome way for us to build Messenger really fast. And so that's something Katie's been working on. So
Cool, and it opens it up to the community,
yeah.
right? So there's all kinds of cool things you could do.
Yeah, so I guess starting from the beginning, I guess add-ins are actually just little .NET components that you build. They're really, really easy to build.
Wait, you said .NET components?
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Nice
yeah,
to
Messenger's
know.
actually hosting the CLR, and
Excellent.
yep. So you can use VB, C#, whatever you want, compile it into a .NET DLL, and inherit from one of our interfaces, and there you go. You've got a Messenger add-in.
That's excellent. Now, one of the add-ins I've always wanted to do, or features that I would like to see, would be I don't want to only have 5 options of my state.
Yeah.
I would like to be able to create multiple, and another thing would be like mood
So
state,
that
right?
yeah. So well, there's a couple of things. We're still under some limitations with regards to like what the present servers and what the server side
Okay.
logic will let us do.
Sure.
But one of the things you can do with add-ins is we have something called a PSM, or personal status message, and that's kind of like as any kind of sentence you want to put in. For example, like whatever your own state is that you want to come up with, and you can do that through Messenger's UI. You can also have an add-in that basically like automatically does that. So maybe the add-in has some knowledge of your schedule or something, and knows like since it's midnight you're asleep, and so it changes your PSM to be like Katie's asleep or whatever. So I can actually so right now we have kind of like a limited set of sort of scenarios that add-ins can do. We want to do a whole bunch more than what we currently have, but some of the stuff we currently have going right now is kind of cool. So I can actually show you
That would be
an
great.
example add-in, and
Sure.
then how you can get started building your own.
Come around here and see the old.
So right now I've kind of jumped ahead a little bit. I've already added an add-in to Messenger, and one of the things that you can do is you can configure it so that the add-in that you've selected. I guess I should start a little bit more at the beginning. And so add-ins actually the way you program an add-in, you don't like directly say set Messenger's PSM to this, or set the status to this. You actually, an add-in itself is kind of like a fake identity. So it sort of has its own personal status message and its own status and its own friendly name and things along those lines. And so when you write an add-in, you're just kind of like filling those things out. It's really easy. And then inside Messenger's UI, you can actually select one of your installed add-ins to act as your agent, is kind of what we call it. Basically what that means is while the add-in is on, whatever the add-in's PSM is kind of becomes your PSM, or personal status message. Likewise, whatever the add-in's features are kind of like double over and kind of take over what your various identity features are. So I can kind of, in this case, I guess I can show you an options dialog. So if you go here,
I need to get. Sorry, this is pretty obtrusive.
no problem.
Very analog here. All right.
So this is a Messenger options dialog, and there's a little add-ins tab down here. And essentially what's going on here is this is a list of all your installed add-ins, and right now I only have one, and it's this one called Demalia. And I'm going to select that add-in to be kind of my currently active add-in. So if I go ahead and apply that, now I can do something like set my status to away. Say I'll be right back. Oh wait, maybe not. No, I'm just going to turn it on. So I went ahead and turned on my add-in, and essentially right away you can kind of notice this is sort of a personal pet add-in that we created. So right away you kind of see that the user tile for this person changed, and the personal status message for this person changed. And it's kind of cool if somebody else notices
great.
that. So here's on another machine. If somebody else notices that and says, hey, what's going on? You can actually see what happened. I didn't type anything over here. What happened is the add-in actually programmatically noticed that there was an incoming message, and it can parse that message and see that, oh, this is the first time this particular user's talked to this add-in. So it kind of gives all its introduction text, and the add-in actually sent this message back. And so you can actually do some pretty cool sort of AI stuff. Like, say, if I say something like, I'm having a... The add-in notice that, like, the person types, something that began with I, and it immediately jumps to this funny text about, oh, enough about you, let's talk about me, and kind of starts going over its state.
Excellent.
And you can do anything you want. Like, this particular add-in kind of tells you, oh, I understand a couple of these commands here. So if I type something like give haircut, you can see that the user tile actually changed, and his hair got a little shorter. And what's kind of cool, if we look over on the machine that's actually running the add-in over here, the friendly, or the PSM actually changed to reference that somebody is actually talking to him. And so all of the buddies of this person actually see that, actually see the user tile changing and the personal status message changing and things like that.
Very cool.
And what was it? Something else. Oh, and the other thing that's kind of cool is add-ins can... so if I go over, and this is like the local machine now, it's kind of confusing, I'm sure. But if I go and type something like... if I type something like that, essentially what happened is the add-in is also latching into the outgoing messages. And it noticed that the outgoing message, started with a slash, so it's kind of a secret command to the add-in itself. So the add-in kind of processed that internally and actually incorporated what I just typed into its AI. And it responded, instead of sending that message, it sent this like cool little action message here. And if over on the other side I typed something about... you can see that, like, right away the add-in's AI already got smarter and more customized towards what, basically the person running the add-in had done. So there's kind of a lot of cool possibilities with that. We're pretty excited about it.
Absolutely.
We want to open it up and do a lot more APIs than what we have right now, but the feature's actually live in our latest builds. So if you go, I have a blog.
So this is your blog?
Yeah, so I just recently started this, and if you go here, there's a little blurb about what the feature is and what kinds of, kind of describes all the APIs we have exposed right now. And if you go down here at the very bottom, there's some sample code, and it shows you how, like, really, this is like, what, 20 lines of code? It mostly comments. This is a really easy to write cool add-ins.
Excellent.
So.
Very, very cool. So you want to get to some Niner questions, and then perhaps
Yahoo.
Yahoo, the Niner question.
oh yeah, the Yahoo
Yeah,
interop.
the Yahoo. I think Yahoo is just the thing that's making us all go kind of crazy around here right now with excitement, good crazy.
So what does it mean, Yahoo interop? With their instant messenger client, you can now communicate with it through.
Yeah, so initially we were going to do this. So basically now what you can do is you can add people who are using the Yahoo client basically on the Yahoo network and talk to them from Messenger, from Windows Live Messenger. And you can get presence from them if they're signed in on the Yahoo client. You can IM them, you can send them nudges, you can send them emoticons. There's a subset of the features that we support. We don't support everything yet. But in the first version, IM, emoticons, nudges, those are the ones that are supported.
That's cool. So I mean,
maybe let's talk about so this feature. The general idea of being able to add someone from another network onto Windows Live Messenger has been something that we wanted to do for a long time. Specifically with Yahoo, we've been working with those guys for, over a year now, right? And we went through a bunch of different, the key was we wanted to get this thing out quickly, as quick as possible, make it so that people can actually talk to one another. And we maybe can talk about the different routes that we looked at technically.
is it purely a technical problem, though? Certainly there's a policy level at the server.
There's also like a business deal that has to go through, right? Other than that, there are technical issues where the first route that we went down to actually approaching this problem was that we made the client actually talk to both the servers. And basically, which would mean that you would have to have an account on Windows Live Messenger and an account on the Yahoo network. You'd have to sign into both, and then you can get like buddies from one to the other.
Sure.
But when we actually had a working implementation of that code, and there was a demo, and a bunch of people liked it. But when we actually thought about it, we wanted it to be like email, where you just like have an email ID, send email to anybody in the world and it goes to that person. You don't have to have a Gmail account in order to send email to someone with a Gmail ID. So initially, then we kind of it trickled down to this scenario. The scenario we wanted to enable was that we just basically add anybody with a Yahoo ID in our client and we should be able to IM them and talk to them. So the first one was what we like to call it the client-side approach, where the client talks to both the servers. Now it's the server-side approach, where the client talks to the messenger server and the messenger server talks to the Yahoo servers, and that's how we get the interop. I can talk a little about...
You could draw them up
Yeah,
on the server.
let's draw the servers and then maybe talk about how...
So I'm just going to add to this diagram here. John spoke about how if you want to IM someone from A to B, it goes through the mixer. So the only change that we made here was for sending Yahoo IMs, we directly send the IM to the CS. The CS talks to the Yahoo cloud or the Yahoo servers. And they basically route it to their client. So that's all the difference. We don't talk to any of the mixers. Our CS talks to the Yahoo servers through a modified version of the SIP. It's not the full SIP standard. I don't know the exact details, but they've removed a lot of the state and session maintenance information that comes along with the SIP protocol. So that's it was very simple to implement IM-wise, but we had to make changes to add them to allow adding Yahoo contacts to our address book. And do you want me to talk about some of the challenges we had there?
Of course. Well, I mean, yeah.
No challenges.
No challenges. We only have 10 minutes of tape left, so let's keep it
Do you want to do the demo then?
I want to do some questions first.
You should do the questions.
yeah, okay.
So it's been
of a Yahoo client talking to a, or we can, yeah.
So I can show it to you on right here. I'm having crappy wireless, so the messages are kind of delayed. But here's an example. I have both of my clients, and as you can see right here, I have all kinds of Yahoo people. And if I send a message from Windows Live to Yahoo, it gets there after, our very fast wireless picks it up. See, there we go. It just appeared on the Yahoo side.
Great.
And they can nudge over here, and you'll see a nudge after a couple seconds. Thank you for...
Somewhat instant messaging.
Yeah. It's faster on my
Relative
other
ease.
computers, but...
Sure.
There we go.
There we go.
But you can change, your presence, and they'll see it on the other side. You can add you can send emoticons. Those work, and I mean it's pretty nice. Now you don't have to run two clients if you're both a Windows Live and a Yahoo user.
That's right.
True.
You can.
I mean, it'll be one day when everyone is using card space, aka info card, and you just use your info card and talk to anybody you want as long as there's policies, a server, and you have business decisions.
Yeah.
Right? Agreement.
And we just have to get a new bridge on there that's mind to mind.
Yeah,
And then
that would be great.
done.
Ooh, yeah, you got it.
one thing I think is so interesting.
Work on that.
Make it happen. Well, I just think it's really interesting to watch kind of how the business is going right now, where we see, we're sitting here in the IM world and we're trying so hard to interop between, all the other different IM clients. We don't understand why these artificial lines are being drawn. And then I'm sitting there watching TV commercials and you hear Verizon and Sprint and all these mobile services are trying so hard to build up these barriers where it's all about the in-network and they're going in a completely different direction. I find that fascinating.
Very interesting.
So I have a bunch of these Niner
questions. So
yeah.
let's make sure that let's show everyone that we're actually.
Yeah, we're actually there.
Nine.
All right. So I've just been reading through them. There's a lot of themes. So rather than kind of get at only specific questions, I'm going to just try and answer some of the ones I see here that are appearing a lot.
Okay.
A lot of people have questions about advertisements or adverts. I bet we have a number of British Niners on here.
Yes, we do.
So one thing a lot of people are asking, why do we have to see these adverts everywhere? Why can't we turn them off? So the very easy answer to that question is, we have a huge team of people. It's all pretty much funded exclusively by ads. So, we got to have ads in there in order to eat dinner.
Okay.
That said, I actually really value these comments because there's definitely an idea behind good advertising and bad advertising. And not to say we're doing bad advertising, but actually an area that we're really trying to focus on, which is, having irrelevant ads. You're maybe happily married and you're getting these match ads. How to find a date or something. That's not necessarily that appropriate. So one thing that we have a bunch of people working on right now is how to get, at least if we're going to have ads to fund us, in the client, they're going to be relevant and they're going to be non-intrusive, and they're actually going to show up. If you're IMing with someone, well, I don't know if we're going to do contextual, but
That's
if you're
hard.
IMing, it's hard, and it's a little scary that it looks like we're monitoring
Sure.
IM conversations. But we just want to make sure that if we're going to have ads there, they're actually things that people might actually find interested in, and the advertisers feel the same way. They want to get ads to the right people. So
Sure.
that's something we're not, just trying to splash a whole bunch of color all over the place, and we know
It's
that's
not like it's profit making. It's you have to pay for the people that think up and write the software, like you guys.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to do this for free.
And it's not just us too. If it were all peer-to-peer, we wouldn't have as much operating costs, but it isn't. As you can see from those boards,
Sure.
all those boxes on the top end
Yeah.
are all boxes that cost money on a daily basis. So
Sure.
we have to pay for them.
We send a lot of traffic through our servers. A lot of traffic.
With 240 million people, we have over 100 million logins a day, some billions of messages to pass through there, and we have to pay for all that bandwidth. So
Exactly.
Anyway, that's one of the.
So
That's a good
just
point.
to-
All right, so I think that's kind of clear.
Yeah.
I mean,
And to wrap that up, a few people said you didn't used to have ads. Well, we didn't used to make any money. We used to lose a lot of money. So that's part of the reason.
You're
for
getting
that.
closer to the black now.
Yeah,
on MSN
exactly.
land. It hasn't always been the case.
We were.
Although we've always had the nicest
Yeah.
campus, which when I was in Windows used to bum me out. Windows makes half the money that the company makes, and we have this crappy building in 26.
It's just the newest. That's why.
Oh,
It was
okay.
the newest.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right,
So,
let's move on to the next
Yeah,
one.
so some other questions. A lot of people have questions about winks and nudges. This gets back to something we were talking about in the beginning. So you'd be surprised. I get a lot of email from a lot of different types of people, and I would say my inbox is filled with about half people saying winks and nudges make me want to, as someone put in here, gouge my eyes out. And then the other half saying, winks are my favorite things in the entire world. When are we going to get new winks?
Sure.
So that's one of those things where, we just have just a staggeringly diverse group of people. And one thing that I think we've been aiming for is to kind of try and get everything in there so that people can kind of pick and choose what they use. So if we have everything available, then in theory, we can kind of make everyone happy, of course, except for a lot of the Niners, which are kind of the minimalists that don't want to look at a bunch of stuff that they're not going to
Well, I
use.
mean, then theoretically, I certainly recall in the file options menu, I can disable nudges, and I can
That's right.
disable
That's
right.
winks, and I can disable the little smiley faces. So.
And in general, especially with Windows Live, we want to make it more and more configurable. So the idea is the user controls his or her experience.
Yep.
Obviously, we've got to have some ads. But in general, we want to make it easier and more obvious how to turn bits off that people don't like.
Sure.
But it is interesting to note that Windows Messenger is still out there for the most part, and MSN Messenger, now Windows Live Messenger, eclipsed that product, something like 90%, and so somebody's liking the winks and the nudges and the user dialogue.
So this brings up an interesting question. I mean, are the days of Windows Messenger over?
Yes.
Yes.
I mean, it really should be.
Absolutely.
Yeah, they're
Yes.
over.
Yes.
It's not in Vista.
So,
Okay.
although I saw someone on here said, I really like Windows Messenger. What are you doing? Why are you taking it away from me? And the answer to that is really just to try and focus our resources. I mean, before we had a team in a completely different building working on Windows, and we were working on MSN, and we weren't really talking to each other very much. And
Yeah.
this is a really great way for us to focus our efforts and get all the right stuff in one client instead of trying to, juggle two or beyond.
Excellent. So are there any other? So those are the two
one
major.
technical question about the blocking.
There's a technical.
Someone,
Oh.
can someone? Thought
Yeah.
John can answer that one. Let's see.
It was if I block someone, can they still find out what my status
Yeah, can they know
is?
whether or not I'm blocking them?
No, not unless they ask one of your buddies who hasn't blocked you. I mean, there's no way in the protocol they can tell, but, if I blocked Katie, but I didn't block Adam, and Katie just asks Adam, hey, is John online, then Adam could tell her, but there's no way from the protocol you could tell. The server will just tell her that I'm offline if I block her.
Okay. So
Same thing
that's-
with appear offline too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, appear offline works basically the same way. Yeah, except if I'm appearing offline, I can establish outgoing connections to people in certain cases that I might not be able to if I block them.
Well, if you appear offline, you can't actually send instant messages, which
Yes,
I think
you
is
can.
wrong. You can't right today.
You can today in
You
8.0.
can today in 8.0 you can.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I mean,
People ask-
I used to be like, it's appear offline, right? You're not offline.
Yeah.
All right, because you might want to be offline and then still email people that
that's
you don't.
right.
You know what I
People
mean?
ask for it, so we did that.
Which would be interesting if you could have contextual status in the sense that I want to be offline for this person that's a pain in the A,
Yeah.
but for
Yes,
everyone else
that's
I'm
my
online.
groups.
People
And
have
this
asked for
person
that.
I'm away, and
They
for my
want, like,
boss
a-
I'm working.
Yeah.
They want different pictures for their coworkers
Yeah.
and for their friends, and
And this
you
is
know,
all
it's
happening
something.
in A.
No, that's not an A.
that's
not.
That's something
coming.
we're working.
That's
on.
coming, yeah. That's John's just saying we get that a lot. Even people on the
Okay.
team want that.
I want
Sure.
it.
And it's I don't know.
Well, you're a developer. Make it happen.
I want it for plugins too.
Excellent.
It's actually we I don't know if you guys agree, but in a lot of ways, it's not really as much of a technical challenge as it is figuring out how to show it to the user.
Yep.
Are we?
We're running out.
Okay. Okay.
Oh.
Anyway,
So what, hey, thank
things
you.
are coming. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you. Last parting words.
Go get the client.
Yeah,
Go get the client.
Get the client. Yeah, get
And
the
we'll
client.
put the link up
Yes.
on
Keep giving us
Channel 9.
feedback.
And write some
We're going to get
plugins.
feedback.
Write
some plugins.
Write some
write some
plugins.
plugins.
Niners, complainers, write
Yeah.
plugins.
Yeah, write
Yeah.
the plugins.
All right.
Yep.
Very
Tell me
good.
what APIs we need to add.
Cool. And just, Channel 9, I'm sure the Niners will speak up and
Yeah, fantastic.
give
Cool.
advice. And
Yeah.
thanks
for
for
watching.
yeah, thank you.